Back in July, I put together this PowerPoint presentation, and I thought the data was kind of self-explanatory, and I just put it to a musical track. But given the events of the last week, I think I want to explain a little further. This is the electoral map from 2016. We're probably all familiar with it at this point, showing Trump's victory. Somewhat historic is the current electoral map. In the last 2 weeks, some political gravity has started to reassert itself, especially in Texas. It's now shading back a little more towards Trump. Before saying the Trump campaign to spend money in Texas is still an amazing win for Democrats in this cycle. And one of the things that's incredible about this map is, yes, all of these portions that went for Trump are now leaning back toward Joe Biden, but this is just bonkers. So yes, Texas is still in play, which for an incumbent Republican is simply insane. That is madness right there. So 181 of Trump's 2016 electoral votes are jeopardized. Maybe this is or isn't true based on current polling or based on what happens this fall. But right now, a lot of this is in play. And that has Trump probably a little worried about his chances this fall. So what is he going to do about it? So the first thing is he's going to keep playing this card. This is the big lie of this election. I've lived in Washington State for 7 years. I've been experiencing mail-in voting for that entire time. And I can tell you that it works just fine. Our Secretary of State here in Washington said this is crazy not to get behind mail-in voting. And, that's an exercise for any of you to look up. If you don't believe that mail-in voting is secure, you're simply mistaken. It very much is. And it is a very anti-fraud process. But that's not how propaganda works. You tell a big lie, you tell it often enough, and people will start to believe it. That's what's happening here. As I said before, I live in Washington. So those 12 electors, they're going to go blue. That's political gravity of a type that isn't going to be overturned anytime in my lifetime. But the point of these attacks is really not to overturn Washington or California or New York, because we all know that those are going to be blue votes. The point is to challenge the legitimacy of, would these votes, really have all been counted correctly? There are too many votes in New York and California, and they're going to use this to maybe deny that Trump lost popular vote or something of this nature. So this is sort of a run the table scenario for Joe Biden. If everything that's in play ends up in Biden's corner, then what happens? And this is obviously a historic shellacking, and this is not my prediction. I don't know that this is what's going to happen. This is what I pray happens. This is what I hope happens. Even a handful more states join, but this is my sort of worst case scenario for Trump in this election cycle. So the other thing he can do is try to delay a few states, right? And this is where messing with the post office and, delaying the election can come together, and maybe some other thing that hasn't been revealed yet, something nefarious that he hasn't thought of. He doesn't have to get everybody to postpone the election. If Texas and Florida alone delay their elections, it's 67 electoral votes. He doesn't need every state to postpone. He's going to say this again. He's going to offer postponing the election again. I guarantee it, because that's how this works. When he first started attacking mail-in voting, it was like another month before he brought it up again, because the backlash was enormous. And the same with delaying the election. The backlash was huge. We've had some time to process it. It's been a couple of weeks. My guess is that before the end of August, he's going to bring it up again. And he'll bring it up more often as we get toward November. And maybe a couple of states go along with it. So if we attack California, Washington, and New York as invalid elections based on mail-in voting because we have unfunded post offices that can't deliver ballots in time, and we don't have results in states like Texas and Florida, that is going to give us a crisis. There's no path for Joe Biden to get to 270. And so just those states removed from the map puts Biden at 260. Think about that for a second, that Washington, California, Texas, Florida, and New York are these huge population centers. But Texas and Florida are state strongholds for the Republican Party, and there could be pressure to delay an election there. There could be shenanigans in those states or some other combination strong enough to delay an election. And this is what could happen. And I'm not saying that it's going to happen. Again, this is just theoretical. But what happens to those 163 electoral votes? Well, Trump will claim them, obviously. he'll say that Joe Biden didn't get to 270. And by saying that, he's not saying that he's owed all of the rest of those votes. That's just left to assumption. It's enough to goad some of his supporters into doing terrible things. So claim Democrats are trying to steal the election, demand new elections, demand no mail-in voting, do anything and everything to stay in the office. Several pundits have talked about after November, Trump might not want to leave the office. And this is a path for him to do that. And worse, this is also a path that if he has the rhetoric behind it, he might be able to foment civil war. He might be able to get his followers to pick up arms and say, look, they stole the election. These commie libs, they're, trying to destroy America, blah, blah, blah. And that's where things could get ugly. I mean, truthfully, historically ugly, which is why I'm bagging on things like Unity 2020, because there's no way for them to win. Kanye is an operation to steal votes from black men. So there's a lot of shenanigans afoot, and the only potential recourse is to stay vigilant and to convince your friends. Look, you don't have to like the guy, but you have to vote for him. You don't have a choice in 2020. There's only one person on the ballot, no matter what your ballot says. Any other year in my life, since I became a voting age, Unity 2020 would be the kind of thing that I would probably fall for. Oh, that sounds great. We don't have that privilege in 2020. Look, I don't like Joe Biden. I don't even like Kamala Harris anymore. I used to like Kamala Harris. I bought her book last year, read it, thought she was a very capable leader, but actually watching her campaign turned me off to her as president. So I am really not excited about the Democratic ticket. If you don't agree with me, read a history book. It's clear to me that we are approaching the collapse of empire that we have seen all throughout history in the UK and fall of Rome. And you can either rise to that cause and help save your nation, or you can be led astray. That's it. Those are the only options.